Welcome to Game Fondue Reviews. In this video we're going to take a look at Chrononauts. Chrononauts is a card game in which players travel through time and try to manipulate various events in history. Let's jump right in with the description of the rules, see a few example turns being played, and I'll be back for some closing remarks. This is Chrononauts, set up for a two-player game. To set it up, you lay out the timeline cards in an 8x4 in chronological order. Then you give each player 3 regular cards, a mission card, and an identity card. The rest just form stacks, although the only stack you really need is the main deck. The gameplay is very simple. On a player's turn, they will draw 1 card and then they will play 1 card. There's a few different ways to win though. If a player fulfills their mission by having all of the artifacts listed on it, they win. If a player ever manipulates time so that their original reality comes true, they win. Or if a player ever ends their turn with 10 or more cards in their hand. It has to be at the end of your turn, by the way, and you can only declare victory on your own turn. These are the only types of cards that count toward that hand limit of 10. These do not count. So mission, ID, or you just get a whole bunch of cards in your hand and you win. All players do lose, however, if 13 of these paradoxes on the board are exposed at one time. Everybody just loses the game immediately because time has been ripped apart. So let's go through the game turn. The first part is just very simple. You just draw the top card of the deck. There's no exceptions there, and you always do that. And then you move to play a card, and there's 2 ways to play a card. You either play a card face up, or you discard a card face up. And if you choose to discard a card, you may discard a second card and then draw a new card to end your turn. And that's referred to in the game as killing time. However, if you play a card, there's a few different types. The first is these artifacts, and you just play them in front of you, and if you get the right artifacts as indicated in your mission, you win the game. Next are gadgets, and the same way you play them in front of you, and then for the rest of the game you're going to have a special ability that you can use on later turns. Next is actions. You play the action just right to the discard pile and you just do what it says. For instance, this one allows you to steal another player's artifact. So that resolves, and then that's the end of it. Next are time warps, and they're just like really powerful actions, so they work the same way. You do what they say and then you discard them. There is one exception to the normal rules in the game, and that being that you can only play a card and execute it during your turn, but these memos you can play during another player's turn, and it just cancels the action on them. It says all what I just said on the card itself. Next are inverters, and inverters allow you to flip linchpins. Linchpins are these purple areas, and they say linchpin on them. These blue ones are ripple points, so these do not affect them. But some of them allow you to flip any one you want, so you can flip like so or flip back, and others are very specific about which linchpins you may be able to flip. So you execute that card, and then you pretty simply discard it. And the last type of card is a patch. And when you play a patch, you get to draw a card. That's noted on it here, and that's how you can potentially get up to that hand size of 10. But this is the only card that when you play it, you get to draw. And you can only play it on paradoxes as indicated. You can't play it on the ripple point. This is the 1991 ripple point, but this patch is played on the 1991 paradox. So you just put it on top of there, and if the card would ever have been flipped back, so if this effect occurred, this gets removed from the game. But for now, you have patched time, and that paradox does not count as being on the board. The last thing to understand is how the linchpins and ripple points work. So if this linchpin is ever turned over, it shows you where these ripple points will happen. So 1986 and 1991 would become paradoxes if this ever flips over, because it ripples to those 2 events. But they can be fixed by patches, and then inverters can turn everything around. So that's how the game works. Remember, you win the game if you ever fulfill your mission or your ID or have 10 cards in your hand at the end of your turn. Must be the end of your own turn. And all players lose if there's ever 13 paradoxes showing on the board. Let's get going with this playthrough. So each player has their mission, and if they were able to get those artifacts in front of them, they can claim victory. And each player has their identification, and this is the original history they came from. So if this player is able to patch 1917 and 1918, but keep 1950 in the real time, he'll be able to declare victory at the end of his turn. And remember, anybody who gets 10 cards can also do so. So we're going to start with this player, and to begin every turn, you draw a card, and then he's going to play the Sports Almanac from the future faced up in front of himself. And then his turn is over. So the next player draws a card, and then he's going to be a little bit mean. He's going to destroy the Sports Almanac by discarding this action card. It removes any gadget or artifact from the game. So that's out of it. and then it goes back to this player, and play proceeds like this. We'll jump ahead to when something a little more exciting happens. Welcome back. It's a little farther in the game. You can see a whole bunch of paradoxes on the board now, and some of these linchpins have been flipped over. It's now this player's turn, and he has a few extra cards in his hand because he's patched a few things, notably here. So he plays this card. It's an inverter, the Restore History. Flip any red linchpin back to black. So he plays that, and he's going to flip this one right here. So when that happens, you'll note that this paradox says restored if that's restored. So this one goes back as well. And he's doing that because he noticed the other guy flipped that one over. So he's thinking maybe that's part of his ID. So then this guy draws a card, and you know what? He has a reverse fate. He's going to use that reverse fate to flip this right back. And you'll note that this one says Ripples 1918, and this one is paradoxed if 1914 flips over. So that's kind of how that works in the game. We'll come back one more time when it's a little bit closer to the end. Welcome back. The game is probably about to end. It's getting pretty close. It's this player's turn, so he's going to play Perform a Miracle action card, which just lets you discard one artifact face up in front of you, then setting your hand aside, draw 2 cards, play 1, and discard 1. So he's going to get rid of this Mona Lisa. So he's going to draw these 2 cards. He's going to discard 1. He's going to play the other. It's a Time Warp. Remove any card other than a Time Warp from the discard pile and immediately play it. He's going to play Get There First, which allows him to steal an action or steal an artifact in front of somebody else. So he's going to steal the Cure for Cancer. Sounds kind of evil. But now his turn is over, and because his mission was to have any live dinosaur, the Crown of Thrones, and a Cure for Cancer in front of him, he can declare victory at the end of his turn. Chrononauts is a silly little game with a fantastic theme. The idea of traveling through time and changing events and then seeing the ripple effects really appeals to me, and I like that a lot about this game. The gameplay itself is very simple. It's literally just draw a card, play a card. And the cards, though, they are funny. The artifacts and other things like that, and even the wording on different action cards, you know, it makes you laugh the first time and a little bit the second time and so on. So it's good for like a beer and pretzels environment where people are just kind of using the game to interact socially and just sort of laughing. Not really for strategic settings, and I don't really want to speak to the strategic merits or things like that of this game because they're questionable at best. But if this game looks like a neat little fun one to you, check it out. That's Chrononauts. Thanks for watching.